So Garrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. We welcome in Jeff Paterson from Rogers Arena, our Canucks reporter, of course, the host of RinkWide Vancouver in advance of preseason game number 3. Hi, Jeff. How goes?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to seeing hockey in this building. Was in here yesterday for the team's first practice. I asked Braden Cootes if yesterday was the first time he had ever skated on Rogers Arena ice. He caught to the fact that the non-playing group from the game in Abbotsford actually skated here on Wednesday. So he's got a couple of practices, and tonight the lights get a little brighter for the 18-year-old who is going to get an opportunity once again here, and a pretty good opportunity, I think, to play with Evander Kane and Jonathan Lecker-Mackey. So he's got some youth on one side. He's got the experience and the veteran savvy on the other, and I said that's essentially the second line for the Vancouver Canucks tonight. So lots of eyeballs. I don't know how many people will be here for a preseason game, but lots of eyeballs on the first-round pick.
Does Cootes benefit the most from this Nils Hoglander injury, Jeff? We found out he's week to week. I'd like your 2 cents on how much that is going to hurt the Canucks in the early going, because as we know, every game is going to be very meaningful on the early on. And then, of course, who benefits the most from his absence in the lineup?
Right, and I know it was reported by Farhan the other night after the game in Abbotsford that Hoglander was seen with a walking boot. I can confirm still in the walking boot, has added crutches to the mix here this morning around the rink. So week to week is always one of those ones you never quite sure, but I think the Vancouver Canucks have to start making some plans here to start the season. They're inside of 2 weeks now from opening night on October the 9th, and it would seem like that timeline is going to push Hoglander beyond the opening night. So, yeah, I mean, right away you think Braden Cootes. I know Hoglander's a winger. Is there a possibility that Cootes could scoot to the wing? We haven't seen him there, but if he continues to impress, might they be in a position where they want to create an opportunity on the roster for the youngster? After that, then you get to the Abbotsford guys that I thought all acquitted themselves nicely on the same line playing in Abbey the other night. But we know those names, and those guys really were already in a battle for a fourth-line spot, so can any of them elevate into a top 6 role for the Vancouver Canucks? And then you've got Vitaly Kravtsov, who's going to play here in this hockey game. He got a little bit of a bump once Hoglander went down the other night out in the Fraser Valley and played with Philip Hedl. And so it's been a pretty quiet camp to this point. I don't think Kravtsov's done an awful lot to set himself apart, but if he wants a chance here, boy, opportunity is knocking. So I think it's the same characters. But, yeah, I think it does probably open the door a little bit more for a guy like Braden Cootes to start the season here.
Well, it is a top 9 winger role, and I do wonder with Lecker-Mackey getting more run again on that second line, if they just feel like they're going to need offense minus Hoglander. We asked on the Redwoods Golf Course poll question yesterday, they're going to miss him a lot or a little? Like how much pain do you expect the Canucks to have? How big a loss is he in the early going here?
Well, I think the jury is still out on whether it's the 24-goal Hoglander from a couple of seasons ago or the 8-goal guy that kind of slogged through last season, although finished the year strong. The underlying numbers were terrific, but we can't have another year where we're praising him for the underlyings. There has to be a tangible takeaway when he gets into the lineup. So you say top 9. To this point, he has skated with Philip Hedl through a couple of preseason games, and I think they had an eye on Hoglander certainly starting in the top 6. And so Connor Garland could immediately get promoted and, not losing much. In fact, he might be gaining with the way that Hoglander and Garland approach the game and play similar style. So I think that's one route that they could go. As for Lecker-Mackey, it feels like it's go time here. Like I've been underwhelmed. I don't want to say disappointed, but I've been underwhelmed. To this point, through the preseason, through training camp and the scrimmage, there have been some moments. The shot is undeniable, and we've seen the shot from the kid, but we know that about him, right? Now it's time to see what else has he learned after a year of pro hockey over here in North America. Has he rounded out his game? And so you're going to be watching him pretty closely, almost more without the puck and away from the puck than with the puck, because we know what he can do when he's got the puck on his stick in shooting positions, but there's more to hockey than just firing the puck, and most guys at this level can do that. So I think it's still a bit of an uphill climb for Jonathan Lecker-Mackey, but again, like I said with Kravtsov, like if he was looking for that door to be cracked open just a little bit more than it was already, this seems like a real chance tonight for Lecker-Mackey to put his best foot forward.
Limitless anticipation for the season to come for Elias Pettersson. But, alas, it is just preseason. But It is on TV, the first of the preseason games that are available for people to watch. I mean, for the first time, I think this is the first time I've ever uttered the sentence. I'm moderately curious what the preseason television ratings might be for this one as people want to make their early assessments here on Elias Pettersson. What's reasonable to expect out of EP40 here tonight?
Well, it feels like, and I have only seen bits and pieces, but it feels like the Seattle Kraken are following sort of this form chart in the National Hockey League as the road team in the first week, sending a less than stellar lineup. And so from that, we saw Philip Hedl take advantage against a bunch of Calgary no-names the other night. I'd like to think that EP40 could follow suit there. I just want some moments. He doesn't have to litter the score sheet. If he does, that's great. It's preseason, so I'm not going to get too worked up about whether he leads the Canucks in preseason scoring. But I want to see the confidence that I saw at times through camp where he would take on guys one-on-one and try to make those moves and beat them. Like, that's the guy that lit up the National Hockey League and got to 102 points not that long ago. And we saw last year a player that fought confidence all season long. So, I think he's had a moderately decent camp. He's been invested. He's shown some moments. Obviously, for a guy making what he's making. But like a lot of veterans, they sort of ease their way through the first week. And really, I think it'll be fair to start judging him. They got 2 games left against the Oilers in the preseason. We don't know what kind of lineup Edmonton's going to ice, but hopefully it includes some superstar power on the other side that makes it a little easier to assess what you're looking at from a Canuck perspective. So, for me, I just want to see him flash a few times. He's playing with Besser and DeBrusk. I mean, that is likely to be the top line that opens the season. So you want to make sure that those guys are up and running and at or near top form by the time October 9th rolls around. We're still a ways away from that. So, again, I don't need Elias Pettersson to be electric. There are some coming to the rink tonight or watching on TV that maybe have higher standards than I do. But I just want to see some moments that remind me that it's still there and that he's still got it.
I wonder if DeBrusk feels a little bit of pressure to stay on that line because everybody sees the logic behind Kane on that top line too, and not that one is necessarily a better idea than the other, but Besser with Pettersson makes the most sense. Those are your top 2 players together as a duo. That makes a lot of sense. But I think DeBrusk is debatable on the left side at the very least. I would guess he wants to prove through the preseason he deserves to be on that line. No.
Yeah, I think so. I think all players understand that no coach is going to go through an entire season with the same lineup that he ices on opening night. Sure. And whether that's injury, whether that's a lack of performance, whether he's just looking for a spark. And we see that from coaches all the time as well. So, look, Jake DeBrusk kind of got put through the ringer. If you remember the first 5 or 6 games last year, didn't get off to a great start, and by the 3rd or 4th game, he was actually down on the 3rd line for a short while, and then worked his way back up into the top 6, and of course was a fixture there and led the team. But I think they went through sort of that process of where is the best fit for this guy, and as we've talked about, he produced a team-high 28 goals, playing a fair bit with an under par Elias Pettersson. When I say under par, I guess I got to be careful there. Under par in golf terms would be great, but less than stellar Elias Pettersson, as I think we all know. So, it's Jake DeBrusk's spot to lose, but you've got Evander Kane, who I think at some point, and maybe it'll be opponent dependent, if they think that EP40 needs a little protection up there and somebody to create a little more space, then maybe a slot Evander Kane in for a game or 2. But there's always pressure. Pressure comes in all shapes and sizes. But yeah, I think Jake DeBrusk recognizes that this is a great opportunity and probably his best chance to exceed the 28 goals that he scored last year is to find chemistry with Elias Pettersson, get them both dialed in, and get off to a better start. And the other thing, too, is remember last year the storyline around Jake DeBrusk went the first 9 games without a goal and then finally found his form out on the road. But it took him a while to score a goal here at Rogers Arena. So even in preseason, he'd probably like to light the lamp here and just get that feel and hear the crowd roar for something that he was able to accomplish on the ice here tonight.
On Evander Kane, Jeff, somebody mentioned to me yesterday he appears to be going through the motions. Now, look, I can understand a 34-year-old player coming off all those injuries and all those surgeries last season pacing himself. But this is a new team. We know how much the Vancouver Canucks need a good start. We know how much management We know what management feels about practice habits. Foot has called him a culture guy. And of course, as we all said when they made the trade, Evander is playing for the continuation of his NHL career in the final year of his contract. What have you seen from Kane? And do you think that Evander Kane does actually need to show something here with that potential first-line duty available to him?
I don't need to see a lot from Evander Kane tonight. This is his first preseason game. This is a guy that only played in the playoffs last year, so he hasn't played a lot of hockey. I had a great chat with him yesterday. Highly engaging. And we've seen that from the day that he was acquired. He talked about how he is settling in here and now thinks that he's got a pretty good read on the locker room and the personalities of the players that he's spending time with. He talked about dinners in Penticton and the fact that they got out and played at least one round of golf up there in the Okanagan. And so, I think from the summer skates to now, it's just kind of that feeling out process for him. He talked about preseason being a necessary evil at the stage of his career, and he is 34. He's been through this a bunch of times. I really do feel that there is a marked difference between the first week and the second week of the preseason. Like, I think tonight is really more about just kind of ironing out some kinks, getting the game feel, playing with a couple of youngsters that he's probably not going to play with. And the other thing, too, is we know the style that Evander Kane plays. It's aggressive, it's abrasive, and you really, as much as you want to show that through training camp and early in the preseason, I think those are things that get ramped up. You're not going to take your frustrations out on teammates in practices and scrimmage games. And so it doesn't really lend itself to Evander Kane's style of play. But now he's playing a different opponent, a legitimate NHL opponent. I think you'll see him try to be physical in this hockey game tonight. And certainly I would expect that he would protect Cootes if the heat got turned up around the rookie at any point here, if the Kraken try to test him or take any liberties there. But really, I think for me, I've seen what I thought I needed to see from Evander Kane to this point. And again, I think for all those guys, whether it's Paterson, Besser, or Kane, or DeBrusk, it'll ramp up next week as we get closer to the starting date.
On Ratu, and herein lies maybe the problem with gifting a roster spot to a guy who is not yet an NHL regular, but have heard reports that he hasn't looked all that great thus far in what we've seen in training.
Certainly
camp
not getting great assignments for the games.
Yeah, and he tends to be getting more AHL-y line mates. What have you seen from Ratu? Do you need to see something from Ratu? Because needless to say, he's an important piece at a position of weakness for the Canucks going forward.
I don't think Aatu Ratu's ever going to stand out. Like, I just don't think he's a flashy player. And so, he had some moments in Penticton, a lot of them on the defensive side of the puck. I think that part's encouraging. But, he's never going to go coast to coast. He's not going to be the fastest guy on any sheet of ice. We know that. And I think for him, it's more about checking off the boxes of being positionally sound, winning faceoffs. Does he get a chance to kill some penalties? The Linemate assignment is interesting, and I think you can read it a couple of ways. That he skated yesterday, and he had Mackenzie McEachern on one side, and then McEachern was swapped out, and it looks like Danila Klimovich is going to be on one wing and Vilmer Ulrichsen on the other. So, those two guys both seem destined for Abbotsford. Now, maybe that tells you that, as you said, Ratu and the organization understands that his spot in the lineup, just due to the nature of the position he plays, is pretty much set in stone. But for those younger guys, it's giving them an opportunity to play with a guy that looks like he's going to start the year in the National Hockey League. So if you're Vilmer Ulrichsen, you can't say, hey, they put me with a stiff that's never going to see the light of day at this level. He's getting a chance to play with Aatu Ratu. And I think, maybe it's more about his wingers and evaluating them with a guy that's on the cusp of being an NHL regular than it is on Ratu himself. So I don't think he's had a disappointing camp by any means, but he really raised the bar. He was one of the stars of training camp last year and earned that spot. Remember, Pia Suter got hurt in the preseason. Aatu Ratu played the first couple of games with the big league team right out of the gate last year. So I don't know that his camp has been at that level. In fact, I think I do know that his camp hasn't been quite at that level, but I wouldn't call it disappointing. I just think it's more of a guy that's kind of lost in the shuffle, and maybe the focus is elsewhere, and rightly so. You pretty much know what you're getting in Aatu Ratu, and I think I've seen that for the most part through the first week here of camp.
And Papa Lankinen gets the start. That's something else out of the delivery room and right in between the pipes.
Yeah, gave him a couple of days off. I think the baby arrived on Tuesday, and so it's Friday now. He's had a little bit of family time. I'm sure that the fact that he's back here around his group tells you that everything's fine on the home front, and he can focus now on stopping pucks. And again, a guy that didn't get a training camp last year, but jumped on board and carried his weight early on. This is easy street now. The hard work is probably at home with diapers and adjusting to life with a baby. This is just settling in. And so, he wasn't around the team yesterday, but when I saw him on the ice this morning, I thought, okay, that's a good sign. And then he started to do the starters drills with goaltender coach Marcus Terenius, and sure enough, it was confirmed by Brett McLean that, Lincoln's going to start. I think it's the same boat as Stemco, that they're going to play it by ear. They've still got a second week of preseason. They've got a bunch of goalies here, and so it wouldn't surprise me if he gets 2 periods, and then they look. I didn't ask who the backup was. Tolopilo was on the ice this morning. He's getting a fair bit of run, and he's held up his end of the bargain and looked pretty good in the moments that he has played. So if it's Tolopilo again, if it's Ty Young getting another look after getting lit up in Seattle in the preseason opener, that wouldn't surprise me if that's the game plan tonight. 40 minutes for the starter, and then somebody come in mop-up duty.
Yeah, you almost wonder if he wasn't on baby watch, if he'd had played earlier. Read into EPD and Willander as a defense pair for me.
Yeah, some internal competition, obviously, and I think both of them recognize the situation here. I think it remains an uphill battle for Tom Willander just because of waiver situations with other guys and the fact that Abbotsford might just be the best place for him to start. And I had a great chat with him after the morning skate out in Abbey the other day, and he acknowledged that. He recognizes that, playing. And I think the other thing, too, guys, that we have to factor into this is Jet Wu is going to be out for a while down in Abbotsford. Jet Wu would eat up a bunch of minutes on the right side. He's not there. A path is clear, whether it's Willander, whether it is Mancini, to go down there and just really be the guy and probably play half a game. And I don't think that would necessarily be such a bad thing for either of those young guys, rather than being behind a Jet Wu where now maybe you're the number 2 guy on the right side and the minutes aren't quite as available at the American Hockey League level. So Willander showed well in Abbotsford. I thought that was the best that we had seen of him through camp and the Prospects tournament or showcase. Put me on his nose because you know that I don't want to call that a tournament. But the games, those showcase games that he got into. But this will be his 5th game already, if you count the Prospect Showcase and the 2 preseason games. So talking about knocking off a bunch of rust, maybe he is the guy that we tried to identify earlier in the week that's going to get all these opportunities just to continue to be tested, but continue also to put his best foot forward. So I thought we saw his smarts on display positionally the other night against an undermanned Calgary team, and we'll see what he looks like here tonight. But it is interesting that is, where the young guys have been insulated for the most part, playing with a veteran. Here it is, these 2 youngsters that are basically vying for a job and have become fast friends as well. And tonight, that friendship will be tested because it's every man for himself at this level now at this stage of the competition. So,
it's a nice pairing, though. They're kind of salt and pepper, aren't they? Sure. It kind of works. Yeah,
and, there were some subtle things that I thought showed Willander's hockey smarts the other night. There was one play early on in that hockey game where he was getting chased in pursuit back behind his own net for a puck, and I thought he was going to get smoked into the end boards, but he basically allowed the forechecker to push him and sort of used that as a slingshot and gained some separation, was able to wheel around the net. Before you knew it, the Canucks were up ice on a 2-on-1. Archie Baines held on to the puck. He didn't score, but that play started with Tom Willander going back to collect a loose puck, and before you knew it, they had moved it up ice quickly and were off to the attack. So, that's how he has to defend. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got the smarts and he's got pretty good mobility. And I thought we saw that. And look, offensively, hit a post, picked up the assist on the Hoglander goal. So, was able to find his way onto the score sheet as well. I thought it was a really nice night for Tom Willander. But you're only as good as your last performance. And so how does he follow that up with an encore tonight? We will find out.
All right, Jeff, we'll be watching with interest. The first RinkWide Vancouver of the season postgame edition comes Wednesday after that game against Calgary. But, of course, they're also on the ice Sunday for a preseason tilt. So looking forward to Monday already. and unpacking everything from this weekend in Canucks land. Appreciate this.
Yeah, we'll have a couple of games to break down by then and probably some roster moves as well. So I would think that it's probably going to be a fairly busy weekend that we'll have to break down on Monday.